And welcome to the program, everyone. I'm Joke Rogers here in Lagos. Today we begin in Angola, which has issued an arrest warrant for former President Jose Eduardo dos Santos' daughter, Isabel dos Santos. According to local media, the Attorney General, Helder Peter Gross, confirmed that his country is working with Interpol to find Ms. dos Santos. She's been charged by Angolan authorities with mismanagement and embezzlement of public funds when she headed the state oil firm Sonangol. The government has filed several civil and criminal lawsuits demanding more than $5 billion from her. However, Ms. dos Santos has denied the charges, describing the accusations as politically motivated, adding that she's available for questioning. And a UN panel of experts on human rights in South Sudan is calling on the government to investigate and prosecute top officials for their alleged role in sexual violence. The panel made the call during the ongoing international conference on preventing sexual violence in conflict being hosted in London. It adds that the government should immediately remove from office and investigate state governors and county commissioners linked to systematic rape. Professor Andrew Clapham, a member of the panel, says this year has seen the most dehumanizing sexual violence in South Sudan, for which the government bears responsibility because of its failure over many years to hold individuals accountable. He singled out Unity State as among the areas most affected. A delegation from the Unity State government is also attending the conference, but they have not issued any official statement in response to the panel statement. And South Africa has granted permanent residence to Janus Wallace, a far-right gunman who killed anti-apartheid hero Chris Hani in 1993, to allow him serve his parole in the country. Last week, the country's constitutional court ordered the release of Wallace on parole after almost 3 decades in prison. Chief Justice Ray Zondo said refusal to grant him parole was irrational. The parole order has been very controversial in South Africa, with Hani's widow, Limfo, condemning the ruling as truly diabolical, and there have been protests against the decision. Wallace is a Polish immigrant whose South African citizenship was revoked in 2017. In a statement, Home Affairs Minister Aaron Motsoaledi said Wallace was granted permanent residence on condition that he may not use any travel document or passport issued by the Embassy of Poland. He also dismissed fears that Wallace would serve his parole in Poland. And the U.S. Justice Department has announced charges against 3 men who allegedly funded separatist fighters in Cameroon. The 3 U.S. citizens of Cameroonian origin are said to have been arrested on Monday and appeared in court on charges of conspiracy to provide material support to support kidnappings and use of weapons of mass destruction in a foreign country. According to the Justice Department, each man held a senior position in an organization that supported and directed the Amazonian Restoration Forces. They allegedly solicited and raised funds for equipment, supplies, weapons, and explosive materials to be used in attacks against Cameroonian government personnel, security forces, and property, along with other civilians who believed to be enabling the government. The funds were raised through online chat applications and payment platforms from individuals located in the United States and abroad. East Africa community heads of government met in Nairobi in a show of solidarity to find a solution and sustainable peace process for the troubled region of Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, these talks come just days after African leaders declared a ceasefire in a summit in Luanda, Angola, with the aim of stopping attacks renewed by the M23 rebel group. Former Kenya President Uhuru Kenyatta urged groups that were yet to honor the ceasefire to do so quickly in order to give way for humanitarian assistance to fleeing residents sheltered within internally displaced persons camps in the North Kivu province city of Cuba.
It is self-evident fact that our region is united by a common yearning for peace, hope for unity, quest for opportunity, and desire for shared prosperity. For its part, Kenya reiterates its unflinching support for efforts that support diplomatic and necessary military solutions to the effective restoration of sustainable peace and stability in DRC. We emphasize that regional peace and security remains our collective enterprise.
This situation has negatively impacted our region, including the issue of hundreds of thousands of Congolese refugees who are unable to safely return to their homes.
Young groups that are yet to cease hostilities, to honor their commitments, to cease armed activities, and to grant unhindered humanitarian access, and the full deployment and operationalization of the East African Regional Force.
Elsewhere, a plane from an unidentified country has bombed a military camp in the town of Bosangoa in the Central African Republic. According to the government, the plane had also dropped explosives on a base belonging to allies, a term often used to describe Russian mercenaries, before heading north. There have been separate efforts of fighting, reports of fighting in the same area involving rebel groups, the Coalition of Patriots for Change. The attack hasn't been independently verified, and the government says there have been material damage, but didn't mention casualties. Hundreds of fighters from the private Russian security group Wagner have been helping C.A.R's military to fight rebels. Let's get more on this. Let's speak to security expert David Otto, who joins us virtually from London. Hello, David. Welcome again to Network Africa.
Thank you for having me.
So what do you make of, this attack in the Central African Republic?
This is a very rare kind of, tactical attack. We're talking about some kind of, a strange or unknown helicopter, shooting down, perhaps, on what, the Central African Republic has described as, Russian allies, or security forces. So it's unheard of. It sounds more like, an attack from, nowhere. I mean, this, took place, as you rightly said, in the borders between, Chad and Central African Republic, but also, sharing borders with Sudan and South Sudan. The Central African Republic is a landlocked nation, with about 6 neighbors. So this particular region in the north is very close to where, as you rightly put it, a lot of rebels, are operating within this region, but they do not have that kind of capacity or capability to use, fighter jets, to drop bombs or IEDs or whatever that the case may be. So it's a rare one in terms of its tactical approach.
David, what's interesting, or should I say mysterious, is that the aircraft bombed a base where local troops and Russian allies were stationed. Do you think this is an inside operation or a deliberate attack?
It could be, one or the other, and this is why the Central African Republic is investigating. Remember that, Russia, literally, swept, France's feet, in Central African Republic and has now taken full control in terms of military and defense, and then France had to, find its way out. So perhaps, there are, so many, unfriendly relations, between the Central African Republic, which is now being, under the Russian control, but also Chad, which, has very strong influence. And I talk about Chad because this location, Bosangoa, is very close to the northern borders with Chad, but also with Sudan and South Sudan. So perhaps, this is a huge, a diplomatic or perhaps, some kind of a proxy, But again, I do not want to speculate. What I want to say is that it's a very rare tactical, attack, which again, is something that the government of Central African Republic, if it has the capacity or capability to do so, will like to investigate. Perhaps, it's something that, the regional states, would have to sit down and talk about. But it's a very strange one, I have to say.
Right. So this is just one of the many issues, and I say one of the latest developments to compound the situations. What do you think in general, of what's going on in that region?
Well, the Central African Republic has always been an unstable region. You remember the former president, Francois Bozize, had formed a very strong anti-government movement. He claimed that he was robbed, of his position to lead, to become a contender to the presidential election. So that region has particularly been very, volatile. And perhaps, with the death of Idris Deby on the war front, as they claim, Chad has also become, quite unstable. There's so many rebel groups, roaming around the Central African Republic. Some of them linked, to perhaps even the M23 that we hear of in DRC, Congo, in the borders with Rwanda, in the borders with Uganda. So it's a very volatile region, and it is not helped, by the fact that there is a very strong geopolitical fight between, the Russians and of course, the French, who believe that, they own these areas literally. And now, the Russians are picking their pockets, diplomatically. So it's not the best location in the heart of Africa. And, we see that with such attacks.
Right. So what do you think, of the roles played by countries such as Rwanda and Uganda? I do know that Rwanda has been blamed for, being involved in some of these issues, a claim which it has continuously denied. What do you think of their roles in all of this?
In terms of, Central African Republic, Rwanda has a very strong relations, especially diplomatically, but defense-wise. The Rwanda contingency is very much present in Central African Republic. It does, help to protect, the presidency. From a DRC Congo perspective, as you rightly said, the DRC, but also some UN organizations have accused Rwanda of sponsoring the M23 rebels, arming them. On the other hand, Rwanda has accused the DRC Congo military of supporting, anti-government or Tutsi led, military groups or military factions or, whatever, they call them. But, it's something that is happening throughout the region. I mean, DRC has also accused Uganda of sponsoring rebels linked, to, the ALDR, the Allied Democratic Forces, the ones that were accused of, detonating an IED, person-bound improvised explosive device in the capital, Kampala. So it's a very, very volatile region, I have to say that. But it's not a region that, it's limited to one particular country. There is a recent meeting that was held in Angola by the Angolan president, also backed by the Kenyan former president Uhuru Kenyatta, to try and see how they can link up, the situation that is happening not just in the Great Lakes, but in the Central African Republic. So it's a volatile region, and I think much attention has to be paid to this area.
Right. Security expert David Otto, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Thank you.
Back, efforts to have more artifacts looted from the country returned appear to be yielding more positive results, as the museum in southeast London has begun the process of returning looted Benin bronzes to Nigeria. 6 out of the 72 of the artifacts looted from Benin City in 1897 and kept at the Horniman Museum were officially handed over to the Nigerian government in the United Kingdom yesterday. This followed a formal request from the National Commission for Museum and Monuments, and the Horniman Museum has described its decision to return the bronzes as a moral and appropriate response. Our London correspondent, Juliana Olayinka, reports.
Splendid, spiritual, spectacular, and finally back in the hands of those who own them. More than 125 years after they were stolen by British soldiers from the Kingdom of Benin, the Horniman Museum in southeast London have accepted that now is the time to return Nigeria's precious objects. And with it, the British establishment has returned a small but incredibly symbolic part of Nigeria's rich history and majestic culture.
To witness a major collection being returned back is quite significant, and we're hoping it will indicate the trends to come. We have our largest collections of Benin bronze works outside of Benin or outside of Nigeria in the London Museum, and those pieces are ours and should be returned.
My name's Nick Merriman. I'm Chief Executive of the Horniman Museum and Gardens.
Last night's historic ceremony may have seen just 6 of the 72 items held here at the Horniman being delivered back to Nigeria. However, there are plans for more returns.
We have the duty to appreciate significantly those institutions that have responded to that worldwide calling. We are at Cambridge, and we are here, and I'm sure we'll still go back to Cambridge and some other institutions. So it's a process, and it's a way of saying thank you for responding in the proper way, and to also encourage and give a signal to those who are still holding on tight to this artifact that they should go to where they belong.
According to Professor Abba Tijani, the Director General of the National Commission for Museums and Monuments in Nigeria, there are over 5,000 Benin bronzes scattered around the world in museums. The pressure is now on to see that they are given back to their rightful owner.
So whether you're in Seattle or Stockholm, or in fact most major Western cities in between, there may well be Benin bronzes in your local museum. And also, they are amongst Africa's greatest cultural treasures, and the way in which they were taken is, I think in today's terms, it would be seen as particularly egregious and very well documented from the British side, indeed very well photographed. I think that's why it's captured people's imagination.
The remaining 66 artefacts will remain in the UK on loan for now, but they will be returned to Nigeria on a date to be decided. Juliana Olayinka, reporting for Channels TV News in London.
And they're very welcome indeed. Let's move on to other stories. 60 Kenyan women have come forward for life-changing reconstructive surgery to reverse some effects of female genital cutting. The initiative was driven by a humanitarian operation in Nairobi, Kenya, which seeks to return dignity to women who have endured the traditional and age-long ritual.
At a hospital in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, surgeons are preparing a patient for reconstructive surgery. She's a survivor of female genital mutilation, FGM, and has requested anonymity due to the intimacy of the subject matter. We shall call her Jane.
I was 9 years old. I didn't know about anything. I was just told that I was taken for something to make me a complete woman.
Instead, the police officer says she was left feeling incomplete.
This surgery is very important to me because being a woman who has undergone FGM, I basically feel like I'm incomplete. There are things that other girls enjoy, I don't. It has really put my esteem so down. From
Practiced in 30 countries in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, FGM involves the partial or total removal of the external visible part of the female genitalia, usually inflicted during childhood. But in November, the patient was one of about 60 women who came forward for reconstructive surgery organized by the NGO Clitorid. It was being offered free of charge during a 2-week visit by U.S. surgeon Dr. Marcy Bowers, a pioneer in the field.
And much of it is internal.
Dr. Bowers operated on hundreds of Kenyan women during 2 previous visits in 2017 and 2019.
So it's like cutting the tip of the iceberg. But beneath the surface is the iceberg. And so what we do in our surgeries is we bring that iceberg or the clitoral body to the surface so that it can be realized and sensate.
Bauer says the term she hears time and again from beneficiaries is life-changing, and that the patients feel like they have their sense of womanhood back. Rooted in social conventions and cultural beliefs about femininity and sexuality, health experts say FGM is profoundly harmful in the short and long term. Some girls die, and lifelong consequences include urinary and vaginal infections, complications giving birth, and psychological pain. Jocelyn Mwangi is a Kenyan activist who works on community programs aimed at preventing FGM through education. She says the surgery is not the solution to FGM, but that it complements the efforts that are undertaken to stop FGM.
I think it complements the efforts that are undertaken to stop FGM. So at the level at which a girl is not able to pass urine or to pass menses, or even to enjoy her conjugal rights, I think she can be assisted and live at least a normal life.
Kenya outlawed FGM a decade ago with a punishment of 3 years imprisonment and a $2,000 fine. But the practice persists as some communities see it as necessary for social acceptance and increasing their daughters' marriage prospects. According to the United Nations, 1 in 5 Kenyan women and girls aged 15 to 49 have undergone FGM. However, attitudes are changing. Earlier this year, over 400 girls between 8 and 15 years graduated from a program in which they were trained in aspects of Maasai culture as an integral step towards womanhood in the Kenyan community. In traditional Maasai culture, girls were expected to undergo circumcision, but this time, the 4-day training program was organized by the African Medical and Research Foundation in Kajiado County, the home of the Maasai community, as an alternative to FGM and early marriage. At their graduation ceremony, Maasai elders blessed the girls by applying oil on their foreheads and reciting traditional rites.
That's Network Africa. Thank you for watching. I'm Joka Rogers.